Well, thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues and friends, for being here today. It's not easy, obviously, to be in what I felt being my house too. The ACP house. Just to live, because this time is real. And so therefore, but there are moments in life in which you need to obviously looking forward, but also turn the page. So, but it's not an easy moment, but I would like simply to thank you for this opportunity to be with you again, to share again a bit of our emotions, our feelings, and our thinking, maybe, of what we can do together as European Union. On a personal note, I have to say that it could be maybe it's difficult for people sometimes also in the Commission to understand why there's been a choice to work for Europe, maybe a bit starting with Lomé. But it is true that when I was at the university and studying a bit where the challenges of, let's say, the international cooperation in the 70s, because I refer to the 70s, obviously, and I arrived to analyze the first Lomé Convention, I think it was inspiring, because it was inspiring for the European Union, because through this Lomé Convention, which was trying capturing, let's say, some request of the South at that moment, the recognition of the asymmetries, for example, the recognition of the fact that we were not equal at all, the recognition of the fact that you were depending from commodities too much, the recognition of the fact that ownership, that was not called in this way at that moment maybe, but it was should have been the center of gravity, not imposing anything, but rather listening and then, let's say, putting to the service of that knowledge and experience and money. The fact of understanding the necessity of co-deciding, and many other things that I would like just to recall and to remind to all of us, which were captured in the Lomé I Convention, And it was a delicate moment in the international relation at that time. I mean, the European Union was just a bloc with the recent life and existence, very much inward-looking, and Lomé agreement, and therefore the relation with the ACP, for not easy, was not straightforward. No time to go back now to the Yaoundé 1 and 2, but simply, it was not the European Union of today, but the European communities, with a lot of commitment to enlarge, to create a single economic space. There were this first idea about a possible monetary union, but this was in a context of the 70s, in which, the independent states, which started very often in the 60s, from the decolonization, started to stand in the world economy in order to get their rights. And in order to stand, in order to negotiate this. You remember, there was the moment in which the GATT was considered inefficient, and therefore UNCTAD was created. It's the moment in which, all the commodities were seen as, and rightly so, the basic right and property of your own countries, and therefore the attempt to create different councils to manage all this. The asymmetry, which was suggested also by the experience with the oil, with OPEP, not to use this also in political terms. There were, in other terms, a new order. And I remember very well that the word at the time was the new economic order. And there were bright figures from the South, Mexican, Algerians, and others, which were, let's say, consolidating this. So, in this Lomé Convention, the European Commission of the time, the European communities of the time, were challenged to make a choice, to understand this, and therefore to translate what was our starting point, peace, democracy, solidarity, into something which could have been the basis, an equal basis with the biggest group of states in the South. So this was, say, politically, historically perhaps, and certainly institutionally, extremely original. And I remember very well that not everybody was happy, because the recognition of this being equal, co-deciding, ownership, not just doing things, but discussing. Therefore, the recognition of the partnership was not necessarily so straightforward at that time. And this was something capturing my attention as a young student. But on the other side, what was capturing was also that, there was a specificity in the ACP group through the Georgetown Agreement. The fact to set up a group with, let's say, a profile and a person with a choice, which was not that easy, because it is obvious on one side that there was this hunting spectrum of the post-colonial, group. But on the other hand, there was the choice to stand, but to stand together in respect of a community in which you captured the idea, certainly, the aspiration to be something different. And therefore, I saw this, let's say, the fact of setting up this group to negotiate together, which was not necessarily also straightforward, because there were long discussions on what to do and how, were, in my view at the time, I felt precious input. Also being a precious input because of the originality of the construction. So therefore, just to share the first point, that my, let's say, European, perspective had been built also on this, and looking at what this could have meant outside. By the way, my field doctor thesis was precisely on the external relations of the communities, and in this, the role of the relation with the South, with developing countries, occupied a very important role, along with all the jurisprudence of the Court of Justice, which started giving power to the Commission to conclude agreement in terms of competence. So, and it was not only trade, it was more than trade. And the important issue that was still to underline, that I recall sometimes because it seemed a bit marginal, it was based, our association, on the Article 238 of the time, association agreement. Was after the enlargement was the most powerful way of doing together. So, I mean, there was a message, a strong message. And I have to say, this was pushing me also to look a bit more. Then when I arrived in the Union, by the way, I wanted to work in this field, but, the opportunity were few. By the way, I didn't know basically anybody, so, and then I was requested to go to agriculture department. So therefore I started agriculture. But when it was possible to shift to the old DG8, I did. And therefore I started in the 80s, in 87, my, work with the development and with you, not only, but mainly with you. So therefore it has been something which has characterized a bit my European path, and I'm very happy, because looking at that now, years ago, decades after, I think that there is a fantastic, let's say, symmetry between the evolution of the Union and the evolution of our relationship, for the good and for the bad. And I think that I always say to people now that they are eager to say foreign policy is much more important than development, much more important than here and there, and that at the beginning undervalued the relationship with you. Let's be frank, because you know it. I simply like to recall that the first foreign, let's say, policy act of the Union, in the sense of the Union, not of a member state, has been the Lomé Agreement. Because inside there were a number of elements which have been then developed, and then for the Union and for you, presumably. So therefore, this has been something that I would like to underline, which shows also why I've been always very much attached to this House, to all of you. Second thing is that it has been for me a formidable journey, because working with you, having visited, I think 90% of your country, still missing some that I try maybe to do on a personal path. I mean, for me, it has been a formidable journey through history of Africa, of the Caribbean, and Pacific. And I've seen many of you transforming, many of you dealing with challenges that I always tried and seen from your point of view, of course, but also from our point of view. People saying far away, not true, because dealing with peace, dealing with the blocks when the world was divided into two blocks, dealing with civil wars, dealing with the struggle to build institutions, to invent form of democracies. We have been always a bit patronizing on this because, because we have our rules, our values, etc. But those working closely, I will try all the time to see what were the attempts to create not only states, but legitimacy of the state, efficiency of the state. So it has been a formidable journey through a geopolitical reality, which has been for me fascinating, and that I tried all the time to accompany with reading, not only history, but novelists. And I've always been attached to the African novelists, the Caribbean one. I know a bit little less about the Pacific one, let's say, but a bit, because it is important to understand. And for me, it's been extremely enriching, because it's not only an administrative relation. And I have to say, I never dealt with you only in an administrative way. Sometimes was maybe good, sometimes not. But I try to capture your reality, cultural reality, let's say social reality, and digging a bit. And every time I had the possibility to visit one of your countries, those more than others, Haiti, for example, been there several times, but many, Ethiopia, many, all the time to look at the people, what was going on, what was even the artistic production, because this is extremely important. So therefore, this has been my second point, a journey through the history of us and you. I hope you also had the possibility to look at the evolution of the Union on this, because if when I say that to my colleagues, they maybe don't understand, but part of it is also the result of you. It's part of the result of our partnership. Maybe it is not visible, maybe sometimes not, should be analyzed, but I know what I'm talking about. And all what we are doing, today with the post-Cotonou, the difficulty of this exercise is to capture that. And the difficulty of this exercise, showing that, let's say the perception was not necessarily always the same, is precisely the difficulty to start it. In many quarters, by the way, many quarters in Europe, and also not only in Europe, was to say this is industrial archaeology, basically. Let's get rid of that. This is not the point. Now the world is much more complex. Now the world, this post-colonial deal is something to get rid of, new realities, new something here and there. Several of these criticisms, allow me to say, are to be taken seriously. Obviously, it's not something to say all this without meaning. No, was to be taken seriously. But our counter-argument, and I worked specifically on this because I had the chance to be with you, with your countries, since many years, was precisely to bring this back and to go through this journey and changes, and then to arrive up today. And, to say, look, we are talking about multilateralism and globalism, Well, we have already a partnership which is global. And then why a hell? Instead of transforming and building together something new, we have just to get rid of it. Because there is still a shadow of post-colonialism over around. But the shadow of post-colonialism first, should not come from the European Union, should come from you. To say, look, we want to do something different. But we have already done something different over the years. Therefore, let's consolidate now into something which is totally different, which is already different, but totally different in the sense, the two biggest blocks of the North, as we used to say, of the South, are concluding again an agreement which is based on what? On trying, working together for a better world. SDG is this. And we call that common foundation precisely because it is the common foundation. This is the point. And then, multilateralism, globalization, SDGs, is an ideal area in order to relaunch and to even restate that if we do it together, we can be helpful in shaping a better world. This has been, I said that in Coreper a couple of times. And this is not a language for Coreper. Because Coreper is much more a language of, a bit of hypocrisy, whatever. But I said that in this way, what we are talking about. What are you talking about? Talking about this. Do you agree or you disagree? Then, it's put a bit of confusion on the other side. People say, well, after all, you're right, but this is too candid. Well, let's be candid sometime. So this is the challenge that we have, still unfinished business, because the negotiation is still ongoing. Happy to see that on the 28th there will be the meeting with the two negotiators, Robert Dussey, who's a good friend, by the way, and Neven Mimica. We have put a lot of energy on this. So let's have for the first time, the picture of what it could be. But then, and here, I take also the risk to come back to a couple of points, the articulation on pillars, because I am convinced over this experience that the two-group logic is a powerful factor, but we have also seen progressively, because the world changed, you changed, we changed, that if we are not able to capture a bit more, the diversities, and to tailor-made some framework in which we can go more deeper on the basis of this foundation. Regionally, we risk not to be effective and sometimes not to be credible. The reason why we suggested this idea of pillars. By the way, those which are a bit more on here, like I think Patrick, remember that in 2006, when I was in my first DigiDev, we produced precisely 3 documents that I still have in my archives. One was the proposal for the joint strategy with Africa, recognizing the role of the African Union on this. Another one was a special, let's say, strategy for the Caribbean, which turned to be a joint strategy. And the third one, a joint strategy with the Pacific, At the time, by some, I was accused to want to split the group, And I said, no, exactly the contrary. The group will be split if it is not able to decline itself a bit more, following the needs and the reality and the differences in geopolitical, geoeconomic, and geosocial, by the way, also terms. So it was a debate. From that, I had to say that the results were not small, because from that, the joint EU-Africa strategy, Lisbon, etc., was born. From that, the recognition of the role of the African Union as a reality that the Africans have created, was to be taken into consideration. From that, also, my tireless effort to work with CARIFORUM and CARICOM in order to, not to turn that into something similar, but maybe to share experiences in order to facilitate what the Caribbean states wanted. Same, different, but with the Pacific Forum, that at the time I was the only one attending regularly, by the way, Then happy to see that now there are politicians, high-level politicians going. But I remember that 2005, 2006, 2007, I said I was the only one going regularly to the Pacific Island Forum, to attend the post-forum dialogue in order to have a meaningful understanding. So, the idea to have the pillars in order to go just closer, for me, was a necessity that I tried to explain also through these documents at that time. Now, this is why I was a bit sad, allow me to say, very frankly, when, even if in politics you can understand everything, but very sad to see that when we proposed this, we were attacked, in particular by some in Africa, as if we're, not recognizing the African Union and still working with the ACP, this group which is diluting everything. While our approach was precisely to offer a way to our African partners, to combine the two, but not to divide, but rather to combine. And I think that we are now a bit better off now, in my understanding, because things have been moving a bit, but the full understanding is not achieved yet. Let's keep working. But for me, it has always been a way to turn your logic, which has been existing since Georgetown, the experience that we have been doing together. So the multilateralism on your side, too, and the new reality of the African Union to be brought to something which is closing the circle and not breaking the circle. Similarly, with the Caribbean and the Pacific, according to different variable geometries, models, etc., but a bit this. So this remains my deep thinking, also because I don't see a real alternative. And this is in the interest also of the Union, if I may say so, because the more you are fragmented, the more we are fragmented, and vice versa. And therefore, I think that if we want to tackle the challenge that we have in front of us, we have to take that in this way. Then I think we are advancing. I think it's not done yet. But similarly, with the financial means, I grew up with EDF, basically. And then I understand the logic. I know the mechanism since the third EDF on. But it is also time here not to cultivate the separation. I mean, but to work on the basis of an instrument which is not separate as if the ACP were in a corner, but to work with an instrument in which we can capture the complexity. Take Sahel and Northern Africa. You know, I mean, you are doing work together with Morocco, with Egypt, etc. You know, we are divided in our instrument on this. This does not mean to have the same policy for everybody, but at least to have the possibility to do things together. Same thing in the Caribbean. You know, I mean, let's look at, not in an artificial way, we are cutting out of a place. Geopolitics suggests that you are close to Latin America. And what we have been doing with Latin America suggests that we cannot have, you know, just, you know, limited by boundaries. This does not imply everything everywhere at all. But when we are talking about security, when we're talking about drug smuggling, for example, when we are talking about, let's say, the element of the local added value chain, well, it's obvious that, by the way, the important role that the Dominican Republic has played precisely as a bridge on this, in my view, has always been very clear and very positive, you know. And I hope that tomorrow also Cuba will be in a similar position. You know that I've been working also on this very, very clearly, because for a number of reasons that we have no time maybe to analyze. But so on the Pacific, you know, when our presence in the Pacific, when I started traveling over there, 2005, 2006, and all the time at the Pacific Island Forum, I saw, you know, the interest that the real neighbor of the region, Australia, New Zealand, United States, were paying to the presence of Europe. Some say, well, what do they want? And others say, well, but there is a project. Let's build on this project, you know. And in one of the Pacific Island Forum, when it was held in Australia, I think in Cairns, you know, I mean, the then Prime Minister of Australia, you know, organized a specific memorandum of understanding between Australia, Pacific Island state, and the Union, precisely to try and build something together. Now, today, I think we are advanced. So there is always a component of geopolitics which must be taken into consideration. So this is a reason why, you know, even today, in which the scale, the shape, the dimension of the problems, you know, been so dramatically under stress, I think that we need to stay together even more. Critically, creatively, you know, but the challenge we have is to create something which goes beyond the old scheme and will be precious for the Union if the Union understands that, which sometimes is not necessarily automatic, you know. So, and then we can decline that on many things, you know. Obviously the sadness to see the islands of the Caribbean systematically hit by hurricanes, hidden in their economic growth, in their social, for the people. In the Pacific, same thing. The attempt to build innovative insurance scheme, for example, which is a bit dry in respect to human dimension, but there is always this kind of matching. Now it is a global issue, climate change. Let's call it in this way. We have been in the forefront of this, by the way, also for the COP21. So you see that it works. We have, let's say, to strengthen it further and to remind a bit, to recall where we are coming from, what we have done. By the way, personally also, you know, I try to make it visible. Moreover, when I was at the head of the first DG Dev, you know, I changed the name. And I call it DG Development and Relations with Africa, Caribbean and Pacific States. Because it was set aside. EIS didn't exist at the time, so we were in charge also of the political relations, and they wanted that be seen, you know. This is also something, you know, that just to raise up, because obviously, you know, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, attention on the East, clear, half of Europe, but also half of the environment of this Europe, Mediterranean, Middle East, you know, but let's not, let's say, forget the friends. Let's not forget those with whom we have transformed ourselves. This has always been my attempt to explain, including in my, let's say, when I was at DG Home, you know, talking about migration, respect, understanding. If it's toxic for us, it's toxic for you. Just explain to many people, say, be careful, you know, because whatever. And then trying to build a partnership about mobility, because this is what we're talking about. We like it or not in Europe, but also on your side. We have to manage, mobility. The world is mobile, will be mobile, and it's not only a question of despair. Just a question that people like to do better, to move. It's true for Europeans, it's true for you. So these are the scale of the challenge. I try all the time to put it visibly because I believe that was revealing. Also, as I go to an end, because I could speak for a while, sharing my experience. But it was also rewardable to see changes around this table. To see, people which were sitting together but just barely speaking, apart from the personal relation, like my friends of Ethiopia and Eritrea, now being closely, embedded into peace. And I could make several, examples. The transformation in Mauritania, that I also followed that. The transformation in many countries, the reconstruction of Haiti, President Preval, even before Prime Minister La Tortue, with whom I remain friends, and many are like this. So the transformation was also enriching to see, and every time to try to help without being too intrusive. Well, we are a bit intrusive because but we tried all the time to be intrusive in a positive way, and sometimes also to the fact to do it to give evidence of trust with the budget support, for example. For me, beyond what is the financial instrument, has always been, and I always explain that also in Parliament, because often in Parliament, is a question of trust, is a question of relationship, is a question of upgrading the dialogue. What more and what better than to say, I don't do a project on your behalf, I give you the money in order that you do. Don't fish, don't give a fish, teach how to fish. How Claude Chesson, at the time of the Lomé one, said, this is not, EDF is not our money, it's your money. So, the inspiration is a bit this. So trying to be there, to share, not necessarily to agree every time, but to give you the mean for your ambition. This has been always a bit up. Now, so all this and a number of anecdotes that I can share, I could share, with each of you. Fiji, for example, was fantastic when we were, and I had a personal relation still with the Prime Minister Foreki Bainimarana, but when basically, Fiji kicked off everybody, it remained only us, and therefore we were mediating, with New Zealand rugbymen in particular. And then Australia, and then the others, and we found ourselves basically to be so. Just to say the presence also over there. By the way, when we see each other with the Prime Minister, just joke because we recognize ourselves because we were wearing the same shirt, flowers, red and white. So and we are destined to understand each other. So and many others like this. So it's not always been easy. It's not always been a joke, rightly so, because we are not joking with people, with countries, with the realities, including on our side, by the way. But this has been this journey that I made with you. That reason why, it's a difficult moment because now many times you change and come back. But this time, after all, retirement is retirement. Even if I remain in Brussels, even if I remain at your disposal, if in case you feel it useful, and in any case, you know that you can count on me as a friend and as a promoter, sometimes critically, but always positively, of our common history, of our common heritage, And therefore, just ending up to say, for me, it has been fantastic in human terms, professional terms, intellectual terms, because we have to invent constantly, and I appreciate a lot all what we have been doing. First, for your countries, because I've seen the transformation. Second, for your country and the Union, because this House has been, in reality, the first House of third countries with the Union. Now there are many, but it's been the first one, this one. And by the way, for a number of reasons, it remains here, in spite of, different attempts to do better. And I think, maybe, well, in any case, let's talk about that. And the fact that we have been, let's say, with you also physically here to share this has been extremely rewardable. So a big thank you to all of you here, the former which are in the countries, your authorities, etc. I repeat, you can count on me, but more important, I think we have to keep working for this friendship, solid alliances in a world which is falling apart a bit between these two groups. And then let's have that in mind, and I think this could be a very good contribution for shaping a better world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for taking us through that very interesting and exciting insight of your journey